Good evening, church. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathan Pipe. I've been a pastor's in training for about 6 months now. We joined the church with my wife in the fall, and it's been great to be part of the FBC family. Unfortunately, in the last few months, it's been a bit difficult to spend time with you under the circumstances. But hopefully we'll get to see more of each other in the future. So I'm going to be preaching today from James 4, verses 13 to 17. And I'm going to start by giving an overview of the book of James, so we can place this passage. James is the author of this book, and he's believed to be the brother of Jesus, the leader of the church in Jerusalem. And this book is a letter that he wrote. He wrote this letter to the Jews that were dispersed in other nations. They were a minority, and so this should give you some context. And the letters were things that the church used to encourage one another and to address issues that they faced. And this specific letter is from the mid-40s AD, earlier than most, if not all, of Paul's letter. So I should give you an idea that this is early teaching for the church. And the context of this passage, it fits in between two different topics. So before this passage, you have a section where James addresses worldliness and just being friends with the world. With that, he calls believers to humility and submission to God. As I mentioned, the Jews that were on the receiving end of this letter, they were a minority. So it's always more difficult when your way of life is counter to the main culture. On the other side of this passage, James has a warning for the rich, that their wicked behavior and their riches, their focus on their riches that are perishable, is against God. And the thing I want to highlight from this book is the way James addresses three elements of human experience, of the human person. The heart, the mind, and the speech. These are three very important elements. At the beginning of his letter, James encourages believer to ask God for wisdom, but doing so without having doubts, without being double-minded. Throughout the letter, James approaches topics by focusing on speech. He'll say things like, you say this, or you say that, and then he addresses the meaning of that. And he has a whole section in chapter 3 where he addresses the importance of taming the tongue. And lastly, in the section before this, he talks about how conflict among believers comes from passions being at war within them, within their hearts. So, and this passage is no different. Actually, we'll see that in this passage, all three elements are present. And I will point that out for you. But let's read from James chapter 4, verses 13 to 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there, and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and we will do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So James is calling us to not be arrogant in our self-sufficiency, not be arrogant in our abilities. We just sang that, the breath in our lungs is yours. So he's calling us to not be proud in any ability that he has granted us. So as I mentioned, he starts the passage by focusing on speech. He says, you say this. And historically, he's addressing merchants that at his time, in his background, in his socio-cultural background, these are people that were despised for making profit the center of their lives. And it's a big change. It's a big tone change from the beginning of the letter, where James is trying to encourage believers to rejoice when they meet trials. It doesn't sound like these people are facing trials. It sounds like these people are very comfortable. It doesn't sound like they're thinking about where they're getting the next meal. It doesn't sound like they don't know if they'll still have a roof over their heads tomorrow. No, they're planning big things. They're planning on going to a different city. They're planning on going to LA and starting a business there and make money. And James's issue with this is not that they're making plans. There's nothing wrong with making plans. Plans are good. Paul made plans all the time. And he shared this in his letters. But he also often mentioned that, he had a plan to go visit somebody, but the Holy Spirit prevented him from going. And that's why he's writing a letter. But where is God in this plan? We will go into such and such a city. We will go to Tucson, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what's going to happen. And then we're going to come back richer. I don't hear God in this. I don't know if you do. And I think this is a good parallel for our current situation in terms of if we're looking at it on a global scale. I think this is an issue that many Christians face in the first world. We're relatively blessed materially. We have wealth. Most of us don't struggle with knowing if we're going to eat today, like they do in the third world. My dad always watched the news. Don't think he has stopped, but really religiously watched the news. And one time, there was this report, and it showed people. I can't remember exactly what the report was about, but it showed people in a third world country that they were sifting through dirt to find seeds that they might eat because they hadn't eaten in days. Well, that's not the challenge for us in the US today. So it's easy to get into that mindset of planning without considering God because, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about where, if we're going to have enough to eat today. We're making plans maybe for God's stuff, and then we have our own plans with our business, with our job, what I'm going to do with my career. And it fits in the American dream, right? American dream is you pull up your bootstraps, you work hard, you make a plan, you start a business, you plan your career, and you're successful. You're successful based on your own abilities and your own hard work. The problem is the lack of God in that mindset. And maybe you started following Jesus when things weren't going so well for you. Maybe it was a time of struggle. Or maybe you have experience in your life at times where you're thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. I lost my job. I'm sure a lot of people are in this situation right now. They've been furloughed and trying to find a way to keep sustaining their families. And at this times, maybe you're more inclined to hold on tight to God. But what happens when things get better in a materialistic sense? Do you still hold to that view? Do you still hold to that mindset? Or are you relying on your own abilities? Are you focusing on profit like the merchants? Focusing on Monday to Friday, I'm going to focus on profit, and then at the weekend, or maybe in the evenings, I'll do things for God. See, this is the problem. The two things are not separate at any time. Whether you're starving, whether you're Elon Musk or whatever the other guy's name is, Jeff Bezos, richest man in the world, still, the reality doesn't change that God is still the boss. So what does James have to say to people that say this? What does James have to say in response to the speech of, I'm going to do this is my plan, and this is what's going to happen, and I'm going to succeed? Well, he makes an intellectual objection to start with. He says, how can you say you'll do this or that, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? It's trying to make you think, trying to make you reflect on what you're saying means. And what you're saying doesn't account for any unexpected situation tomorrow. When I was a kid, I had a really weird interest for a kid. Maybe it's not as uncommon here, but I was really into the SAS, the British Special Forces, and I mean really into it. We in Italy we don't have a Halloween, but we have I don't know. I think there is a term for it in English, but I'm not sure. But basically, it happens in March, and all the kids dress up. It's very much a kid thing, and you dress up and you go to school, and you'll have I don't know, I can't remember what those things are called, that you throw, and you have the little pieces of paper, the multicolored. Anyways, everyone just generally goes dressed up as Disney characters. Well, not me. I had a fake gun, and I was all dressed in black. I had a gas mask and goggles. Hey, that's what I was passionate about. In any case, I was fascinated because these are people that really push the limits of human ability. They go through a notorious selection. I mean, these are the first special forces in the whole world where other special forces was modeled after. And they go through this crazy selection, and it's just whittled down to a few, and then they get trained. These are people that have extreme abilities, and they're not just soldiers, because they'll have to go maybe in a group of two in a foreign country, and they're not supposed to be there, and no one's supporting them. So they have to also be survivalists. But one thing that I learned from them is this saying that they have, that you may have heard elsewhere, and it's, only postpone until tomorrow what you're happy to never do. Often this is, when you get it elsewhere, I think I saw like a quote from Pablo Picasso, similar. Usually it's to refer to procrastination. Don't procrastinate, which is something that most people struggle with, I would say. But they were using it to admit the fact that they're not going to know, no matter how much you prepare, they're not going to know what happens tomorrow. So if you really want to do something, you got to do it today. And I think this shows a very good secular understanding that you don't know what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow can be full of unexpected things, dangers, changes. And it's just striking that these people that are really able and maybe have more right than I do, for sure, to brag, to be cocky, they're saying that still doesn't matter. No matter how much you prepare, no matter how good you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how much will you have, you don't know what tomorrow comes. When preparing for the sermon, I also wanted to find an illustration that was more present in our lives. I don't know if you guys can think of anything of how tomorrow can bring lots of change. Any big change happened recently? By a show of hands, how many people thought in the fall that, well, actually, let's start with this. How many people in February thought that they might find it a challenge finding toilet paper in supermarkets? Just for the record, no hands. How many people thought that when the economy was just on its longest bull stretch ever recorded, meaning it just kept growing, unemployment was at a 50-year low, that in the next year, in less than 12 months, we would hit the highest unemployment record ever recorded? I don't see any hands. Not that many people in the auditorium today, but still, I think the point stands. And this, has affected me personally. I mean, I went through a lot of change, and it has affected all of us. But it's affected my plans. See, for the last 3 years, I've been working full-time, and I've been studying full-time. I've been in seminary, and I'm just so close to the finish line. You just don't get much time to do things. So I've been thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have a whole month, hopefully, between when I finish school and when my baby's due, to do things, go out, explore. I've only been here 18 months. There's still a lot I haven't seen, and I like going out and doing things and going on adventures. Well, I'm high risk for COVID, so it looks like that's probably not going to happen. Probably going to just be at home. Or, again, we don't know what tomorrow brings, so maybe I'll be able to go out. The point is, we just don't know. We just don't know what tomorrow will bring. And James doesn't really stop here. He doesn't just say, we don't know what tomorrow brings, but he also says this, which echoes what the essayists say. Not only do you not know what tomorrow will bring, but whatever it brings, you're probably not equipped to face. You're not equipped to face much. He says, what is your life? I know you think you're such a good merchant, you're such a good businessman. You're so strong, but none of that's it's not sufficient. It's not gonna allow you to really face any big challenges. I mean, this year we have a huge pandemic, which is really handy for the sermon, but normally, something else could happen. You just don't know. But the point is, your life is really fragile. See, in the broader context, life is brief and really frail. I don't know if you heard of the overview effect. It's something that astronauts experience when they go into space. If they go far out enough and they can see Earth as a whole, they get this, what's been termed the overview effect. So one aspect of this is seeing humanity as one and realizing how the little pieces don't matter, how the conflicts, we should all work together, which what it implies is that the individual is not that significant. It's tiny. I mean, there's no way you could see a building from space at that distance, definitely not a human being. But the other side, the other aspect of this is that they realize the fragility of human life. See, what they see is this oasis hanging in the void of the empty nothingness. And it's just a little layer of atmosphere that is letting us live. And really anything could upset that. And our existence would be no more. See, life can easily perish and is just as sturdy as a mist. Don't know if you ever tried to prop anything on a mist. Doesn't hold much. And this is an important point to understand with your mind. No matter how much you think you're strong, life is just a mist. It's like a mist. It's breath and it's gone. So it begs the question, is self-sufficiency even real? See, I would say that this implies it isn't. If the breath in our lungs is from God, then so are our skills, or so are our abilities that we put to whatever use we put them to. So really we're not self-sufficient in any way. So do you act like you think and act like your life is fragile, or do you think that you're sturdy as a rock? Well, if we think in this correct way that James instructs us to, and he calls out those people that say, we're going to plan and do this, then what should we say? What should our speech be? Going back to speech, what should it be? Well, James makes a really strong statement here. He doesn't just say, you should consider God in your plans. I think a lot of people that have a lot of maturity, they would do that. They would consider, if God wills, I'll do this and that. Especially if it comes to ministry. Should I seek a ministry position? Should I serve in this way? But James is making a stronger statement. He's saying, you need to think it in this way, that you might not even be alive tomorrow. And this is not to say that you shouldn't bother planning, that you shouldn't bother trying to do anything. He's just saying that you need to understand that God is boss, and you need to understand the extent of that. God isn't just allowing your plans or not allowing them or steering you. He's keeping your very existence alive. So you can think, I'm going to go and start a business in Prescott. Probably not a good idea. New York. And you can think, well, that might not happen. No. You need to humble yourself to the point that you realize that anything you have is God-given. James then goes back to address the words. If you're not convinced by this argument, he now makes he merges the mind argument with the heart argument. He's saying, what if you're saying, okay, I think all those, but I'm still going to say this. Because we already shown that the statement is factually arrogant. It doesn't consider God. It considers that you're so sure in your abilities that you're just going to go and do whatever, and that it's going to work. See, I looked at the Greek word that James used for arrogance, and I want to highlight two ways that a commentary shows that it's used biblically, the way it's used in the Bible. And the first one is this: an impious and empty presumption which trusts in the stability of earthly things. Now, we've shown that the earthly things are not stable. I mean, not only our country, but the whole world has come to a standstill. It's just like, this is crazy. I mean, I'm 31 in a few weeks, and I have not really witnessed any huge major conflict, besides hearing about the Middle East. I've never had anything that really affected my way of life to any significant degree. Even personal challenges in my family haven't had this much of an effect. I've been homebound. I don't think that's the right word. I've been stuck at home for a long time. First 3 weeks, I didn't even leave the house at all. And it really affected me psychologically. I like the outside. I mean, I mentioned I had plans to go and do stuff in August, and we'll see how that works. But yeah, I have never experienced anything like this. And I'm sure that if I had even lost my job, I'm sure that if my wife had lost her job, or if I had gotten sick, things would be even more crazy. What if, you end up in hospital and there's not enough ventilators? That's insane to think about. I've only ever lived in first world countries, and that's healthcare. I mean, it might be difficult to access, it might be expensive, but there's never the notion that there might not be a bed for me. Never. So, earthly things are not stable, not by any stretch of imagination. The other use for this word is an insolent and empty assurance which trusts in its own power and resources and shamefully despises and violates divine law. So that's what James means by arrogance. He means you're too confident that things will stay the same, and you're too confident in your abilities. You think you can make plans? You think you can be confident in those plans? That's ridiculous. How many people's plans have been just destroyed by COVID? How many people's plans to just keep going as things were? How many of those plans went out of the window? Oh, but James doesn't stop here. You see, because he's not just saying that you're arrogant, he's saying that you're boasting in your arrogance. See, the word for boasting here in the Bible, most of the time is translated as rejoicing. And actually, some translations use it as rejoicing in this passage. So think about it for a second. Not only are you cocky, but that's bringing you joy in your heart. So it's not only having a wrong mental attitude, a wrong way of thinking, but our hearts are in the wrong place when we say something like this, when we have this attitude. Because there's pride in this thinking. That is not good. So how does James know what's in our hearts? I mean, he's making a lot of assumptions here, right? He's just going off of that. But it says a lot. You know, what he's saying is that what you're saying, or what these people are saying, I'm not trying to point any of you, but what you say shows what's in your heart. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yeah. So if we look at what they say again, today or tomorrow, not sure, but when I decide, I will go into this place, this specific place, and I'm going to spend exactly 1 year there. And what I'm going to do there is trade. See, up to that point, it's like, okay, might go bad for you. Oh, no, I'm going to make a profit there. This is arrogant, and they're boasting about it. You're so far removed from thinking about God that this has become your center. And James tells us this boasting is evil. So why is it evil? Well, he tells us in the last verse of this passage. James tells us that if you know what the right thing is and you do not do it, that it is sin. So my wife and I have started watching this series. I've watched it before, but it's kind of fun to watch. It's called Suits. You might know it. Oh, and it's good because you see how like people are scheming and strategizing, and they get one up on each other. I should say it's a show about a lawyer firm, lawyers in New York. So it's always like trying to beat. It's like a modern day fighters. Trying to win legally any battle that they face. And one of the characters is always saying, I never lose. That's his trademark. He always wins. Far-fetched, but fun. But what happens is he hires a lawyer that is not a lawyer because he doesn't have a degree. He pretends he has a degree. They both pretend that he has a degree from Harvard. Because to have a degree from Harvard is the only way to get into this law firm. So, but he's so smart. You see, this guy has photographic memory. Doesn't exist, but still very impressive. You know, he'll look at a page and knows everything that's on the page, can remember everything. So clearly this guy wants to win, and this is a big asset, but he's not a lawyer. He doesn't have a degree. So he's breaking the law by practicing without a license. Now what happens is the managing partner finds out and wants to get rid of him. And the other guy that never loses say, if you goes, I go. right? So they convince her to keep him. Now the problem is that from now on, she cannot fire him based on the fact that he doesn't have a degree. The reason is that if she does, she's going to go down with him because she knew and failed to do the right thing. She failed to do the right thing, and therefore she is liable. So even the secular world recognizes that. We have a real-life illustration from the last few months. They arrested the policeman, the cop that killed George Floyd, but then they arrested the other three. And it's a logical argument. And, if you're saying that he should have known that was going to be a dangerous maneuver, then so should have the others, and they did nothing. Even human morality understands that failure to act, failure to do the right thing, is wrong. But what is the right thing to do? So what the right thing to do, according to James, is the opposite of what they're doing. We have to be humble. We have to recognize our fragility. We have to have the right way of thinking. We have to submit to God, to His supremacy, to His authority. He is the boss. There's no changing that. No matter how good you might be, He is the boss. Nothing's going to change. You're still going to be, it might be a little bit better off, but it's going to be insignificant in the scheme of things that He holds your very life in His hands. And the other thing to do that we should be doing is to rely on God's provision. That's where our heart should be. We should rely on Him because He has promised that He will provide for us. And all this way of thinking, this position of the heart is reflected in saying, if God wills, if the Lord wills, I shall live tomorrow. And then, if He wills, I shall do this or that. See, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches us to pray, give us today our daily bread. And He teaches us not to be anxious about tomorrow, but rely on God to provide for our needs, just as He does for the birds in the sky and the lilies in the field. And this is a hugely encouraging message for a lot of us that are in a weird situation right now. Maybe you've lost your job. This is a huge encouragement. God has got you. By all means, do all you can to provide for your family, but God is your provider. That doesn't change. But James is pointing out that this is not a message just for when times are tough. This is not when you can't provide for yourself, when you can't provide for your children, God will step in at that point and provide for you. No, that's not the message. He tells us that we need to live by that mindset, by that belief, even when we have the illusion of self-sufficiency. When we might be tempted to boast in our abilities, I am such a great lawyer, I never lose. Those abilities are granted to us by God. Our very breath is granted to us by God. So you have no reason to boast. God actually opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And grace abounds when you're in deep waters, as we sang. Praise God. But we don't want God opposing us. So to hear Jesus' words and not live by them, maybe because you have a good job, maybe a good salary, maybe you're on a good career path and things are going well. Well, doing that is like the foolish man that built his house on the sand. What happens when the job is gone? What happens when you have some other big crisis and everything falls apart? You see, because You can go to Jesus when you're in despair, when you're in deep water. But that's probably not going to bring you much peace if you haven't practiced doing that when you didn't need to. Or at least when you didn't feel like you needed to. It's just not it's going to be a teaching moment for you. It's not going to be a moment where you'll just escape the crisis. It's going to be hard for you to switch your mindset so quickly, to really live with peace, to avoid the stress. And you might believe it, but you will be so stressed. So, don't boast in your self-sufficiency. Don't boast in your abilities. Remember that God is the boss. And remember that your life is fragile. And that anything can happen. So I have 3 takeaways for you tonight. 3 challenges. And they reflect these 3 aspects: speech, mind, and heart. First one is, pay attention to what you're saying. Pay attention to the words that come out of your mouth. Be your own doctor. This is the structure that James gives to his teaching. You're saying this, but you should be saying that. Pay attention. Do you speak and behave as if you are self-sufficient? Do you speak and behave as if your life is not just a mist? Are you arrogant in what you say? Make sure that your speech shows humility and submission to God. Number 2, pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to the thoughts that are in your head. That's one layer deeper, right? Does your pattern of thinking show that you're relying on your own abilities? Are you working out problems, making plans for the future without considering God? Or does your thinking include God? Are you making plans with the awareness that God might just change them? Are you like Paul? I really want to come and visit you, but the Holy Spirit is preventing me. See, Paul went into each city not knowing if that was going to be the place that he died. Make sure that your thoughts reflect an understanding in your mind of just how fragile you are without God, just how weak and frail your very life is without Him. Number 3, search your heart. See, this is a little bit harder because it's even deeper. And it has to do with your beliefs. Are you blind to your own arrogance? Are your own abilities your source of rejoicing and boasting? See, this character from the show that I just mentioned, his all being, any sense of satisfaction he has, it comes from the fact that he wins all the time. So the moment that there might be a risk that he doesn't win, he's just miserable. Pray that God search your heart and submit to what He shows you. And make sure that you cultivate humility within your heart. Cultivate humility. And as Paul did, boast only in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Boast only in what God does for you, what God has done for you. He provides for us, and we must not be crisis believers. I just made that up for this sermon. You see, God uses trials to bring us closer to Him. That is because of us, because we are not close to him. Because we have this idea that we can do things by ourselves, that we're sustaining our own lives. I mean, we're feeding our bodies, right? I mean, it's me that eats, me that buys food to eat. It's me that sleeps, even if not enough. But it's God that provides. He provides me with the money to eat, provides me with a place to buy the food, provides me with a bed. So we must only boast in that. If you're not a believer, you may have at times reflected on how fragile your life is, how momentary it is, how it is like a mist, and how it can end at any time, how anything can unsettle it. Or maybe you recognize the cycle where at times you're on top and you have everything you need and you don't worry, and then at times you're feeling hopeless and it just keeps going. What I want to tell you is that you do not need to be a victim of the waves. You do not need to rely on your strength alone to get through life. No, there is hope in Jesus. If you commit your life to him, he will sustain you. He will provide for you. And you will not be alone. Let us pray. Father, I want to thank you for your word, for your guidance, for your written revelation on which we can meditate and learn and grow. Lord, I pray that you change our hearts. You give us renewed minds to think correctly about our lives, to think correctly about you being the boss and our reliance on you. Especially at this time, Lord, where many of us are struggling. Let it be a teaching moment to really learn to lean on you, to throw our worries on you, and come at your feet, Lord. Pray that you bless our church, Lord. Pray that you protect us from this disease and from getting very sick. I pray that you bless all of your people. In Jesus' name, amen.